immediately PHP reviews and how to review code quickly and maybe start how to do those reviews. Maybe you want to start. Who's doing code reviews already? Oh, so you want to do more than that. That's it? So like half of you say, or better, or better. Okay, so that's the idea. Well, that's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover different ways to include the code review as often as possible. And maybe for those of you who are not doing them, start. And for those of you who are already doing them, maybe a few tricks to do a little more and do them a little better. So for those of you who don't know me, I am a retiring house for elephants. And basically, I'm doing static analysis for a living. So I review code, and then I turn that into automated script that can review code and check my own code and saying that I do the same mistake that you do. Believe me, you have to be really humble when you write that kind of software. But anyway, and I'm sorry, I'm going to do that in English. So if you have to start with just one, and actually bring one piece of advice from this session, that would be this one. And we're going to start exactly with that. Who's doing code reviews at relaxation? 1, 2, oh, how come? Just you stop working and you, yeah, it's a break. Something different. That's interesting. Any other suggestion? Yes, yeah, like reading a book. But that's the way I do it now anymore. I mean,
I wish it was like reading a book.
And then you pull your hair, right? Yeah, there's no suspense, right? But anyway, what I like for relaxation, what I take from the code review is the bliss I get from it. It's like the fact that I've read something, I find a potential bug, I removed it, and that's one less thing on my mind when I'm going to use the code or implement it or reduce it or refactor it or later. So that's exactly why I'm doing it. I like the fact that I will go on my code, check something, make it a little better, and then go on with the rest of the busy, frantic pace I have all the time. But then the first problem you have with this question, with this suggestion is how do you fit that? Do you need an hour long to do a code review? Do you need a small piece of time? No, the first suggestion is to time box it. I think I switched the word, right? But anything that is 15 minutes where I'm going to have, where I have nothing to do, I mean, nothing precise, I will use it for code review. I don't need more than that. I don't need less than that. It's a good size. And where can I fit that? Anything between a meeting, before a meeting, if the meeting itself is too late, if something was, any action was too slow or too fast, there's always little moments like that. Below 10 minutes is not enough. Beyond 20 minutes, it will probably be scheduled by something else. So something in between is usually the good size. Besides, it's time boxed, which is one of the main problems of code reviews, because if you ask me, I'm going to spend hours on that. Okay, so I just want to start doing it, do something, and then close it as soon as possible so I can switch to something else. The other interesting part is, although it's distraction-free, I can be interrupted during it. Okay, it's not a main task. I do it as a side work, a side core. So I just go in it, and if something more important arrives, if I have to update someone on the situation, I can stop doing that and switch to it. So that's another interesting part. I can use it as default, but still switch to something else I want. So that's a good idea. We start with boxing those time. You're busy, so you don't want to spend too much time. But the question now is, what the hell are we going to review? Because basically the situation in which you are is you don't know where to start. Do you? You don't know where to start. There's too many stuff. Basically, the synopsis of a code review looks like that. You know basically what you want. You know basically what you want to look for in the code, but there's this huge code source you have to score and read, and as you said, there's no suspense because you're going to read a lot of stuff that's useless, and then maybe you'll find one of the things that are going to be fixed. So that's too much. On 15 minutes, we can't do that. We need help. We need help. So for that, we actually have to review the synopsis itself and make it a little shorter. a little more accessible to us. If you take a look at how we do code review, we start by a rule. And what by a rule is something that you want to enforce in your code. Do you want to have double or triple equals? Do you want to use echo or print? Do you want to use to check all the str post comparisons, stuff like that? Okay, you start with something very simple like that. We'll do something more complicated later. Then when you know what you want to look for, then that suddenly it's a lot easier. You know what to look for in the code. You can search something in the code. When you find something, then you have the diagnostic, right? That's where you think about what you found and you decide if it's important or not. And then you can do the fun part, which is fixing, right? That's the moment where you have your problem. You know what you want to do. How are you going to solve it? Well, that's time to be creative. But most of the time, we're stuck by the first steps, right? This is the moment that's boring. We're going to review so much stuff before we actually end up with something interesting. While the second part is the one that we are really interested. So this is where I usually introduce static analysis. And static analysis is going to do the core and the heavy work of searching for us until we can take over and do the more clever and more abstract part of the job. Anyone is used to static analysis? Few of you? Oh, less. Okay. So static analysis, as usual, when you have analysis and an adjective, it means that it's kind of opposition. There's dynamic analysis and static analysis. Dynamic analysis is when you run the code, you feed it some data, and you get some feedback. Okay. So that covers actually unit tests. Well, tests in general, because tests, you cannot run the test until the code is actually working. While static analysis is like reviewing the code. It doesn't even have to work. Maybe it compiles, that would help, but at least it doesn't have to work before we actually review it. It's a really exciting time actually to work in static analysis because at the moment there's a huge amount of new tools and new techniques being applied. Okay, I'm going to show you a few of them. There's 90 of them currently available. Don't try them all. You're going to be mad very fast. Choose at least one or two of them. That would be a good start. 5 if you're really good, but they may have some very specific usage. We're just going to talk about that generally speaking. Okay. How does static analysis work to review? How come some other code can help us review another piece of code? That's the synopsis. We start with the kind of stuff that you call code, which is basically a text file. I'm sorry for you, that's just what it is. And then we give that to the tokenizer of PHP to understand the different moving parts in that review. Anyone has ever used the tokenizer of PHP? 1? Okay, 2. I'm going to rephrase that because maybe the question was wrong. Whoever has used PHP? Okay, so you've been all using the tokenizer. Tokenizer is actually the part of PHP that reads the text file, turn it into tokens. Tokens is like, if you want words, maybe letters if you really want to know what it is exactly. Those are the little bits of PHP that it can understand, okay? An echo is not 3 or 4 letters, it's really one atom of element that PHP can understand. On the other hand, isset is an atom, but str till hour is not one of those atoms, for example. When I mentioned it's a text file, you have to consider that once PHP has taken your tokens from the file, it will get rid of 1/3 because all of them are white space and comments. And then it will get rid of another third, which are just delimiters. If you have to take something also from this conference, it's like 1/3 of your code is useful. The 2/3 of it is just completely useless for PHP. Again, I'm very sorry for that. Anyway, from the tokens, we have to build a number of different diagrams and relations between those tokens, which means that we have to store them in some kind of database. Okay, that database may be just memory. That's the case of most of the tools we are going to see. For Exakat, for example, which is my tool, we actually have a real database where we feed stuff and you can actually run other queries later. But once we have everything here, the famous AST, abstract syntactic tree, but there's a number of others like the flow control diagram, the data diagram, lots of them we can move across the code. We need to know what to look for, okay? And there's a bunch of different references that exist and that you can use to explain theoretically what you want to look for in the code. That may be simple stuff, number of parameters in the functions. That may be bugs typical from PHP. That may be a number of other things. That may be just performances or just a regroupment, like a gathering of specific rules for one specific purpose. Anyway, when you get that, you cross it with the database, you get the audit, and the audit just is everything that the machine can detect as pattern in your code that you should review. And this is basically where you start working again. You're going to finish the loop by getting the audit, going exactly in the code where you want to go, and then decide if it's worth fixing or not. Fine with that? So let's go back to the relaxation part, because I see you're a little tense at that point. How do you work with that? We said we want to have this little slot of time for code review, and we've been working with something. We have a meeting after that, so that's the developer time. We have this little span of time we can use, and most of the time you have to run the static analysis before. So you need to have the audits ready before. Okay? Now it's an automated tool. You don't care about when it runs, as long as it's run and it's done before you actually want to review it. Actually, as a matter of fact, I usually run Exakat on itself once a week. That's completely sufficient. I get way too many issues. I usually don't say that in public, but keep that for you, please. But I've got enough issues so that I can just go in the audit and check whatever I want. Okay? Now, most of the time, you see that, and the question is, why is it that we don't include the run here on the new feature? And you actually answered the question earlier, that you're killing my presentation early. You don't want to work on the same feature than the one you've been working. You want to, relax, change your mind, okay? So most of the time, you want to switch the part of the code you're reviewing to another one. That's going to make your brain get some rest, okay? The other thing that we get is that this looks like a slow-moving system, right? Why can we do that? We could actually put them directly on the hook. You could actually have static analysis happen during the coding or just a moment where you're actually committing. Okay? During the coding, I could recommend PHP Inspector for those of you who are using PHP Storm. Do you hear me? Yeah. So, for example, while you're coding, the static analysis will review your code and give you tidbits about what's wrong or what could be better, okay? Along the way, on the fly. Except that, well, it has to be really fast, so it's pretty shallow tests. But again, there are a number of them that are really efficient and that you're already there, you already know about it, fix it, and then commit it, okay? The other places is there at the commit time. And again, this means that this static analysis has to be extremely fast because at the commit, you're really busy. That's the moment where you're going to get relaxation. So you want to commit it. Okay, you have something is not compilable. Okay, I fix it, and then I commit that again. Again, kind of shallow test, but there are a number of other tools that you can use. I have given the three most common ones. And then you can do your code review. But those are two different things. Okay? One is on the fly. The other one is more relaxed and a little out of the busy work on the code. So that's the one we want to be working on. Okay? So so what we want to do is go back there and do an interesting code review. And now the question is, what do you look for in a code review when you're working like that? We know when, we know how to do it, but where to start? What's the first thing people look for when they are working on a code review?
Actually, the first thing I'm trying to do is to understand the code.
Okay, that's documentation. Hopefully you're working on it, so you probably have this documentation part. But that's an interesting point. Okay, so usually the first thing that you're looking for is bugs, because bugs directly impact what you're doing, right? You want to make sure that the piece of code works as expected. And we're still doing that on a busy schedule, right? We don't have a full afternoon to do a review and understand the structure. So let's start with that. Can you understand why we run this piece of code and just get 1.7 and not 2 of them? So I run exactly that, and I just got 1.7 displayed. What? Short is a string? Yeah, short is used as a string, yeah. Yeah. And short is the key. The key from the array is 7.2 here or 7.1 here. The first character of each of those strings is 7, right? So I should actually have 2 of them, not 1. Come on. It's the first character. The character starts at 0. We're on PHP. String starts at 0. I actually tweeted that last week, so I expected someone to actually read that. Yes?
The first index is not a string, it's an integer.
Yeah, exactly. The first integer, the first index here is an integer. Does it look like normal? PHP accepts only strings and integers as keys, unless you make a whole class, but that's another story. So it only accepts strings and integers, and the strings themselves will be turned into integer if PHP can do that without raising any error. So the 7.2 can be turned into a 7.2 integer without raising error, so PHP does it. And then it reaches there, and there it's an integer, and it's not translated again back to a string. So the first one actually disappears. PHP is not able to find the character. It actually doesn't even raise an error. It should tell us, okay? I've turned that into an integer, and then it's not a string anymore. You should do that. This is not the case with this, which is a real number. It does not translate that into a real number. So the second one stays as a string because it cannot be turned into an integer, and then we have this one that applies. So sometimes the machine is able to understand stuff in the code that maybe you never heard about, or maybe you didn't pay attention to it. So sometimes the static analysis is able to go really further than what you actually are used to. And maybe that doesn't happen often, but what I like is that how many arrays do you have in each of your applications? Thousands, right? You're not able to check all of them and how they're used as strings. You're going to be beaten by this one quite unusually. The other test I would like to mention is this one, and that's going to be the contrary question. Who doesn't understand the bug here? No. After answering with the previous one, I don't want you to not understand. That's the contrary here. You don't understand this one? No, I want people who have never heard about that bug. Do you? Yes? Okay, so the problem here, I'm going to explain it, but that's going to kill my very thunder. The problem here is that strpost is looking for the column inside the string variable. That's fine, okay? Except that strpost is going to answer 2 things. It's going to answer the position of the semicolon in the string starting at position 0. So maybe the column is on the first row. That's the first element of the string. And maybe not. If it's not found, then strpost is going to return null. If it's on the first character, it will return 0. And then PHP compare that to false. Null and false, both are double equal to 0. So here PHP is going to mistake the fact that the character is on the first character of the string, and the fact that the character is not found. Then you've got a bug. It's a very classic one. So I'm still happy that like 3 of you raised the hand to say that they don't understand that. But most of the time, you don't have to spend hours to explain that bug. And again, that kind of bug is also systematic. It's like 60% of PHP applications have that kind of bug somewhere across the code. 60%, okay? So it's like 2/3 of the rows, the one behind are good, and the 2/3 in front are not good. So that happens often. You know about it. You don't want to spend hours explaining to anyone why this bug is here. You find it, you close it, you commit it, and the hooks are all going to pass easily, and you're done. Do not even spend time teaching or explaining something to someone else, unless they really don't understand the bug. Okay? So you have 2 different kinds of bugs. The first one are very difficult, very rare, but when they happen, they bite hard. The other ones are very common, and those are the ones also you want, as busy people, to fix without even asking anyone. That should be a no-brainer. Do it, get rid of it, and don't talk about it anymore. Okay? So that's the usual static, that's the usual approach when you want to do something into those 15 minutes, okay? Look for either the easy bugs, the classic ones, because that's the one you don't want shame from, and the ones that are easy to understand that probably everyone understands in the company or in the team, and so just close them. The ones that are easy to forget also, okay? It's like, you know that these guys don't care about this kind of bug, well, you can complete them and just make sure that those bugs are always closed, okay? At best, if you have a short list, or not so short, make it short. Don't start with a short list of bugs, otherwise you're going to spend too much time, okay? The second thing that is interesting is that the machine is able to look at the code and suggest you something better. So I'm going to ask you not to answer. Yeah? Leave some room for others. Could anyone suggest something to replace that ugly for each? That's an ugly beast, right? That's actually one of my favorite PHP functions. Very underestimated. Sorry? No. No. I heard array wall, but that does not exist. What else? That's obviously something starting with array, but with what? Array column, yes. Array column. Array column is a very nice little piece of function. It takes the array and it will loop exactly like that across all these elements and look for the property or the index called A. It works both for arrays and it works also for objects. Do not extract just one column of element from an array with a loop. You can do that faster, more efficiently, and easier to read with that. And again, the machine, it's not a bug. At that point, it's not a bug. It's just a way to make the code better. You can leave it down. You can leave it, say, okay, I don't need that speed boost, so just let it go, and that can wait the next version. Or you can decide that, yes, that's something you want to use. That's an interesting piece of information you want to add in your code, and decide that those kind of suggestions is interesting to put in your code. And then you have got a little bump of speed, maybe, okay? If the array is large, if it's always called, then you're going to see something, okay? And those little things will add. That's exactly what we want to do code reviews, right? Add those little things that do not require our attention for half a day, but maybe for 15 minutes, we can fix that, commit, and that's gone. So on the end, what can we target? We can target easy bugs, clean code in general. You don't want to have those old ways of doing PHP for loops into your new PHP 7 code. So that's the clean code. You may learn something, and you may also learn the local idiom. The local idiom is the PHP you practice in your team that makes you kind of different from the other teams, okay? One classic example is if you send me a PR and you're using the short bracket arrays, I will deny that. I hate that. I didn't start with PHP 3, but I started PHP with the last millennium, okay? No, not last decade, not last century, last millennium. They're all the same, but who cares? And I'm still using that, okay? I find it easier to read. I spot them easily in the code. I don't mix them with list or with array index, whatever. This is my choice, okay? You probably disagree. I'm not asking you to raise your hands. But you probably disagree. That's not important. If I go in your code, if I go in your team and your convention is different, I will adapt, okay? I will moan a little bit, I will mention it, but that's okay. So what kind of what's the take, for example? Who's using echo? Who's using echo in the code? Okay, good third. Who's using print? Okay, there's something missing there. So who's using what else? What are you using? There are answers. You're not using it at all. That's possible. That happens. That's unusual. I don't know. Print here, maybe? Not even. No print. No display at all.
For some debugging purposes, but not in production code.
Okay. So you're using templating system. Okay, that's the meaning. Okay. We could actually add the short operator, or we could add also printf. That's another option. Okay. And if you take a look at this, this answer, this has been run on a piece of code, and the piece of code is using basically 9,000 times echo And 6 times they're using print. Someone is a rebellion, has a rebellion in that code. Just leaving the 6th one and waiting for someone to happen to discover it, okay? That's weird. On the other hand, for example, the arrays, they are all systematically the good array. It took too long for you to react. This is, so whatever the source, consistent is good. I always like consistent. So all arrays or all brackets is good as long as you're consistent with yourself. It's your style, it's your style. Now, how many other kind of characteristic I could use to do that? I've got almost 20 of them. I cannot even show them because you're not going to be able to read them, but here are different ways or things you can do both ways or 2 different ways in PHP with no impact or almost no impact, and that still is something you can choose. So for example, class names. When you do a new class, you create an object, and the constructor do not need any arguments, you can drop the parentheses, okay? Here, apparently, it's 1/3, 2/3. So this is typically the situation where no one is really neither agreeing, neither disagreeing. They don't care. It's something that's not important. That could be code style. But here it's not even enforced. It's not enforced. They don't care. It could be OK. It could be one way, another one, don't care, because here we don't care about that. The bracketed array, the bracketed blocks, whenever you have a control flow block and you have only one instruction behind, do you put necessarily the curly braces or not? Don't say yes or no, I don't care. It's code style, and well, yeah, it could be. Well, it is. What else? Concatenation. How do you do your concatenation? Do you do everything concatenate, so with the dots, or do you put them between double quotes and here docs? Or sprintf, but then that's not for concatenation. So here it's another story. This one is funny because you don't see it. Do you use /n for a new line, or do you PHP end of line? Now, what's interesting, I think, is you look at one application, whatever it is, and you see where they have important, where they focus their attention. They are when the color is unique or almost, it means that that's something that's their standard. So for example, putting the constant you compare with on the right or on the left, like Yoda condition or not, apparently here they're like 2,500 of them. They're doing one side, and there's a very little, like 17. It's difficult to read, sorry for that. 17 times they used the Yoda. So maybe they started doing Yoda, but they did not go far. That gives you an idea of how the team is doing. That's their local idiom. That's what's important to them. Okay? Yeah, that's completely automated. That's one of the audits from Exakat. So currently, I started with 8 of them. I actually wrote an article about things that you could do both ways, and that doesn't matter. And then after that, I actually included more and more. I currently have 20 of them. So you can actually compare different projects just based on that. That's kind of interesting. Okay? So now we're done. Oh, 20 minutes. So I still have to finish. The next problem we have to tackle is how are we going to handle all those rules that the static analysis tool are going to give us. Because I've shown you when to do it, like 15 minutes, how to look and have an audit ready for practice, okay? Maybe choose it the way you want, but maybe you're going to have too many errors or too many issues, and you don't know which one to start with. Any idea, any suggestion of how when you have too many audits, too many issues, which one you want to choose? The important ones. That's good. That's your definition of important, right? What's your definition?
Not code style ones, but the ones that could cause bugs.
Yeah, the one that could cause bugs. That's an idea. That's a choice of what? So I would go with importance with that. Yeah, I understand, but that's a style of thing, okay? Usually, you remember we have 15 minutes. We cannot handle large stuff. So we have 2 main dimensions two main aspects to take into consideration. And let's do a little practice. Here are 5 of them. Here are 5 of them. The first one is easy, okay? Everyone using ++, but actually most of the time you just need the ++ before because you don't read the value while you increment it. Okay, that's a very classic mistake. Usage of arrowbars, no scream operator, please don't do that. Although there are a few situations where you can do it. Switch without default, what the hell is that? You check the situation when you don't know it, you just accept, I don't know. Printf, too many variables or too little. Although too little tend to call you to end up in your logs, so you may know about it. But too many, PHP doesn't care. Okay, he has enough slots to fill, so those are lost variables. And the last one, I made it on purpose. It's a little large, but there's actually 0 because A is added and then subtracted. Which one do you want to choose? Which one is the most important to you? Switch? Okay, so first thing, you do not agree. Secondly, I'm the one talking, so I'm going to choose. First thing I check is how are they easy to change? Again, remember, we have to stay in those little slots. So I try to take a look and understand by default, if I don't know more than that, which one are the easy ones? Because then I can still fit that into my time, right? So I basically add this evaluation. Do you agree with this level or not? I kept it very simple, like 3 levels, easy, medium, hard. You could do more, you could do less, and then maybe you can switch them, okay? Maybe usage of A and the switch are the same level, stuff like that. But that's kind of different, okay? So first, I check the one that are hard or not. If they are easy, then I can probably go in the code, look at it, understand the situation, close that, and commit. Good. If they're hard, if it's a default that I have to raise an exception, create the exception, then catch it somewhere later, log it somewhere, that's going to be a little more. Okay, maybe just trigger or die, I don't know, maybe really simple stuff, but then I usually consider it's a little harder. Same stuff for arrowbars. Usually the commercial A, you have to handle some checks before you actually run the application, run the function and get an error. So I find it like medium error, okay? And the second aspect is how often are those errors available in the code, okay? So the ++ instead, well, the pre++ of the pre or post ++ is like 90% of every PHP code has that kind of problem. So if you want to solve that, you're going to fix a huge amount of lines of code, and you're going to have like 10% of the whole code blamed to you. Okay? So it's easy, but then there are too many options. Okay? On the other hand, these kind of problems, which look stupid, but does happen 3 times, 3%. So how many of us, like in a room? There's like 100, or maybe less. So maybe there are like 2 people in the room who has that problem in his code. That does not happen. But it's also very easy. So easy and not frequent, I just zero on them and just remove them totally. Okay? Easy ones. The one that are harder, then we can decide depending on their usage. So I usually have this little graph that's actually a little easier to see. If they are easy, they are here. If they go harder, they go to the top. Okay? And then on the X side, you have how often does that happen. Okay? And mixing both the frequency and the odd elements of, the odd task of fixing them, you can actually draw that. Okay? If it's easy and not frequent, I catch it. If it's easy at frequent, usually you can fix them easily, and you can fix them automatically. And in between, I have to stop at some level. Okay? If you prefer, you can also make an important emphasis on how easy they are first, and then you can get rid of the first ones this way. But that helps you, separate between the one that you find hard and the one you have easy on your code. Finally, I like to say we are under 2 bugs, and we're going to switch back to what you mentioned earlier. First thing you want to do with code review is learn about stuff. Okay, we've learned about local idioms, things that happen in the code and that interest you, because that's the way you do it here. But while you hunt for bugs, while you go for specific problems, you're going to discover other things along the way. And that may be simply because the static analyzer is going to bring you other things next to the same lines. So you go in the file for one specific purpose, but while you're there, you can fix another bug next to it. Or you just can't discover it, okay? So what do I mean by discovery? What could you do with just one variable? What could you check with just one variable? Obviously, the thing that's going to plague you is the variable that is read, but never written, the undefined variable, okay? That's maybe not a bug, but at least it fills your log, so it's bad, okay? So variable that is available once, and that's just read, that's a problem. But the other side is also wrong. If it's a variable that is used once, but only written, $x is 1. Great, excellent. What else? Never use that again. Don't laugh. Everyone in this room is doing that. You've got lost variables like that, and then suddenly later you want to reuse this variable and it already has value. And you wonder, why the hell do I have this value there while oh yeah, it was there. Maybe it's time to clean that. So variable, you can check if it's written, only if it's read only, but used once is usually a no-no. So you need that a variable needs to be used twice, at least, right? Yes? No? If it's written twice, well, twice the error. So that's the same as the same problem. It's written twice, same problem as usual. It's written but never used. If it's written and it's read and written, first you have to check the order. Secondly, that's good, but is it good enough? Like a variable, you just put one value and then you just reuse the same value inside another expression. That's kind of documentation? Oh, because you're giving a name to the value, the intermediate value. That's an interesting one. Okay, I say it's to use this variable. What else? I just want to have the other balance, okay? Because if you said something contrary, I would say the other one, so it's fine. So what else? Two variables, it's used once.
With different types, like you write an integer, then use a string.
That could be an idea, yeah. It's when it's used. Although you're also introducing typing, and we're just talking about variable here, the amount of them. So the other side is if you put a result into a variable, but you can't really move the whole expression into a larger expression, because if it's large enough already, and then you add an extra expression in it, that's going to be completely unreadable. So already one variable that's used once and then, well, twice, I would say, it's so-so. Could we end up with the rule that the variable has to be written 3 times? Minimal, no variable used below 3 times. How much is that too much? No? Read twice is good. Read once is good also, as we mentioned for readability. Okay? But you imagine that just talking about one variable, we started with the fact that undefined variable is a bug, and we just used our brain to check the different condition, ended up with this stupid rule of 3 times minimal by variable. That's way too much. But maybe for your company, that's not going to be way too much, or that makes sense. That may be a style. Remember, local idiom. No variable used below 3 times. That's what we want here. I don't know. But anyway, so discovery is important. While you're at it, while you're getting the audit for things you never heard about, like the bug we've mentioned earlier, but because of a new development, because of a new feature of PHP, you can learn other stuff from your code or for the technology of PHP or for the API you're using for the framework. So the next step is we're still trying to fit those 15 minutes, but we don't want those bugs to come back. Who's going to reintroduce the famous bugs we've been collecting and removing for a few hours? The newcomers. The newcomers, they don't know how to do that. They are not used to our local idioms. They don't know what's important to us. But since we are bug hunting, or we're just discovering the amount of problems we have in our code, we can collect those. We just keep the name of the analysis we want, the rules that I mentioned earlier. We collect them and we put them in our culture. Our culture, our local way of coding is this amount of list. Or continuous integration. That continuous integration is the one that applies the rules. So that's the tool. But In terms of culture, you know what you have discovered, you know what you want to fix. You collect them just to have one place where everyone knows about them, including the newcomers. And the strategy I've seen working very well with newcomers is that usually if you start with too many rules, you're going to lose them. You cannot start in a team and have 72 analyses to check all the time, even if they're automated, okay? So you start with giving them a very low number of them. I would say something between 7 and 10. Depending on how easy and how obvious they are, that could be a good start. For the first month, those are the first rule they want to check. You want them to check all the time. If they have extra bugs, it's okay. You just need a mentor. It's a newcomer, right? And then after a month, when those rules are good, then you can add an extra list. And then the next month, you add an extra list. And once they have reached the level where they are up to par with the rest of the team, they can start having the same discovery than you do. Oh, that's a good one. This rule has to be added to our list of rules because it's going to improve us. But they know exactly how you work here first. And that's going to prevent you from, reassessing all this time, all the same rules. You have to write that at some point so the newcomers will be able to understand. So, do we agree that we should use that as relaxation? Can we reuse every part of what that means, aspect by aspect, into our code reviews? Think about it. Next time you want to do some code review, think about what you could do and get as relaxation. The main takes from here, automate as much as possible. You don't want to search for bugs, okay? Fix them, diagnostic them. That's where your brain is good. You need a high level of abstraction. Start with that. Select only the important one for you. I have 650 of them just for Exakat. Okay, it takes a long time to run. I get a lot of interesting tidbits. I have no time to fix everything. So don't do everything all the time. Just select your rule and maybe discuss that with your peers. You're here with a number of them. That's the good time to discuss that kind of things. Okay, but don't do all of them. Do the easy one first. If you have to choose, if you're really lost and have those 5 minutes and you don't know where to start, do the easy ones, okay? That's always, one thing fixed is always better. And the usual target I have is 4 hours a week. 4 hours a week. That's like 2 pauses every day. 2 15-minute pauses every day. That's a goal, but it's not too much either. Think about it, how many coffee you can get from that time, right? So there, I collected almost all the links here, but they will be there. So if you want to take a picture, that's the moment. That will be on the slide, which I will provide to the conference, but some people want to have that up to now. All the tools I mentioned during the presentation and I used for that presentation were there. And I have another 2 minutes, so I would like you to take your code and start doing code review now. So thank you very much. And